Hey guys, tonight we drift gently across silvered water, the air thick with early morning mist and a hum of waking insects. You're standing barefoot on a wooden plank, balanced at the edge of something extraordinary. Before you stretch rows of floating gardens, green, geometric, and bobbing slightly in the current. They don't look real at first. They look like a dream someone painted onto the lake. But this is ancient Tenochtitlan, and you've somehow landed in the middle of the Aztec Empire's most improbable miracle, Chinampas, the floating gardens. You inhale, and the air smells like damp earth, crushed mint, and something floor you can't quite place. A bird shrieks overhead, a heron, long-legged and moody. The sky above is beginning to shift from soft mauve to pale gold, with a lazy sun threatening to show up. You squint toward the horizon and make out little puffs of smoke from distant cooking fires, like tiny clouds rolling out of someone's imagination. And yes, you're about to get your feet wet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love reading your comments, so tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto one of the garden plots. It's soft beneath your soles, but firm enough not to sink. Beneath the surface, layers of reeds, mud, and roots weave together in a green miracle of structural engineering. And you're just here for the ride, floating gently across history. The first Chinampas weren't just thrown together like a lazy raft. These were artful creations, woven mats lashed to wooden stakes, submerged in lake water, then heaped with scoops of fertile muck dredged from the canal bottoms. Over time, they became solid, permanent, and fertile enough to grow almost anything. Corn, beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, herbs. Tiny plots of Eden, multiplied by the thousands. You pass a gardener crouched near the edge, dressed in simple cotton, his wide-brimmed straw hat flopping over one eye. He doesn't look up, just keeps weeding with practiced rhythm. You don't need to speak. His quiet focus says everything. This is his life. He knows every inch of these floating plots, every reed and root. And despite the simplicity, there's a quiet reverence to his work. Growing food here isn't just labor. It's a spiritual contract between the people and the lake. Historians still argue whether Chinampas were purely an agricultural response to cramped geography or a deliberate spiritual echo of Aztec origin myths, where life itself sprang from primeval lake. Either way, they worked, and they worked beautifully. And yes, the Aztecs managed to feed a city of over 200,000 people using these gardens. That's more than most European cities at the time. Take that medieval London. You wander further, brushing your hand across neat rows of maize, green stalks rising like soldiers in formation. There's an earthy warmth beneath your feet, and everything smells alive. You spot trailing vines of squash curling over the sides, and little pink flowers nodding their sleepy heads. A dragonfly zips past your nose. You flinch. He doesn't care. In the distance, a canoe glides by silently, piloted by a boy with expert balance and a look of mild boredom. He's transporting baskets of herbs and something that looks suspiciously like frogs. He nods at you, expression unreadable, then vanishes behind a curtain of reeds. Mainstream historical fact. The Aztec capital was essentially a city in a lake. Built on an island in Lake Texcoco, Tenochtitlan was laced with canals, connected by bridges, and entirely reliant on its Chinampa system for survival. Unlike the stagnant stereotypes of pre-modern agriculture, this was vibrant, efficient, and astonishingly productive. Oh, and in case you're wondering, yes, the Chinampas did float. Sort of. They weren't like little boats drifting around. They were more like anchored rafts, locked in place by trees, willows mostly, planted at the corners to stabilize the soil. Picture a raised bed garden that also happens to bob in a lake. Yeah, not bad for a 14th century innovation. Quirky tidbit. Some Chinampa farmers believe singing to the maize encouraged taller stalks. So yes, somewhere in the middle of the lake, there may have been a man serenading his corn. And now you can't stop picturing that, can you? The sun has risen higher now, and the light spreads across the lake like butter on warm bread. It makes the gardens glow. There's movement everywhere. Canoes, birds, insects, and the soft rustle of leaves that sound suspiciously like the earth sighing. You crouch near the edge of one Chinampa and trail your fingers through the water. It's cool, a little murky, and then something brushes your hand from below. You flinch, yank back, and realize it's just a fish, or maybe a particularly bold tadpole. Either way, it's official. You're awake now. A breeze rolls in from the west, carrying the scent of fire-roasted chilies and damp wood. Somewhere, someone is preparing breakfast. You can almost hear the slap of tortilla dough and the low hum of morning chants. This world isn't hurried. It doesn't buzz like a city or screech like rush hour. It floats. It sways. It breathes. And as you sit back on a patch of grass with your arms propped behind you, looking out over a checkerboard of floating farms and meandering waterways, you realize something. You're not dreaming, but it definitely feels like you should be. You stretch out on the soft patch of grass, the damp scent of earth clinging to your sleeves as the hum of the Chinampa slowly fades into the soundscape of midday. The sun has crept higher, and with it, the heat begins to bloom. Not harsh, just warm enough to pull a sigh from your chest and make the air shimmer faintly above the garden rows. The floating islands remain miraculously still despite the distant lapping of the lake, their edges blurred by gently swaying water lilies and tangled reeds. Someone is singing, not to you, not exactly. It's a reedy, melodic tune in Nahuatl, the native language of the Aztecs. The voice is cracked but clear, rising and dipping like a canoe rocking on gentle water. You sit up slightly, scanning the horizon, and catch sight of an old woman hunched over a basket of marigolds. She's placing them in careful bundles beside her, each one tight and golden, glowing like tiny suns against her indigo shawl. You're reminded, suddenly, that this isn't just about food. Chinampas weren't used only for growing corn and squash. These gardens also grew flowers, fields of them, for rituals, for markets, for gods, especially the marigolds, sacred to the Aztecs, and now still used today on Day of the Dead altars. Even the floating gardens were touched by ceremony. Mainstream historical fact. The Chinampas supported more than agriculture. They underpinned Aztec religious life. Farmers often left small offerings at the corners of their plots. Corn husks, feathers, even drops of pulque, the mildly fermented agave drink sacred to the gods. Every seed planted was a kind of prayer. You wonder what it would feel like to plant something with that much intention. You, standing barefoot in the soil, whispering a wish as you pressed a bean into the mud, and then coming back weeks later to see it answer. A dragonfly lands on your knee, You don't move. It's the size of a small dagger, its wings trembling like rice paper in a breeze. You get the distinct sense that if you breathe too hard, you'll offend it. So you wait. It waits. You're locked in a stare down with an insect that probably thinks it owns the lake. And then it zips away, off toward the willows planted like silent sentinels at the corners of each chinampa. These trees aren't decorative. Their roots grow deep, threading through soil and water alike, holding everything in place. Without them, the chinampas would slide apart like soggy lasagna. You wade a little deeper into history now, walking the narrow grassy path between two parallel plots. Each one is brimming with life. Bushy rows of amaranth, the ruby-red seed heads nodding in the light. Low, trailing herbs that smell like sage and something sharper. Tiny green tomatoes hanging like lanterns under a veil of leaves. You kneel to pick one, but a gardener nearby gently waves you off with a polite shake of his head. These aren't for snacking. They're for market. Quirky tidbit. In the Aztec markets, produce grown on chinampas was considered the gold standard. Fresher, cleaner, more flavorful. Vendors even bragged about which island their vegetables came from. Chinampa-grown chilies were apparently so spicy, one market official had to issue a warning about serving them to nobles without proper labeling. Consider that the world's first spicy food disclaimer. You continue forward. The sky is a seamless blue, brushed occasionally with thin threads of cloud that move like sleepy dancers. There's no sign of city streets here. No stone buildings, no marketplaces. Just greenery and water and the faint rustle of insect wings. And yet, just beyond this aquatic patchwork, a massive city once rose. Tenochtitlan wasn't some tiny village floating on a dream. It was the Venice of the New World, a sprawling metropolis, complete with temples, causeways, markets, palaces, and aqueducts, all balanced on a lake, with these chinampas stretched out like an emerald necklace around its edges. It's like discovering that the place where you nap also happens to be an empire's breadbasket. Historians still argue whether the chinampa system could have survived modern development. Some believe the city's eventual conquest doomed the gardens, bulldozed by colonial ambition. Others argue fragments of the system still live today in Xochimilco, a neighborhood on the edge of modern Mexico City, where a few floating gardens survive as both tourist attraction and heritage site. You pause on a small bridge, really just two planks lashed together with dried fibers, and look down into the canal. The water is dark and quiet, filled with green reflections and the odd flicker of silver scale fish. For a moment, it's easy to forget what century you're in. There's no sound of traffic, no engines, just the occasional rustle of wind through maize stalks and a far-off splash of someone dropping a bucket into the water. You kneel and cup a little water into your hands. It's cooler than expected, clean enough that it wouldn't seem outrageous to sip it, though you resist. Old habits die hard, especially those involving modern water safety paranoia. From your left, a boy approaches. He's holding a basket of squash blossoms, their golden petals unfurled like sleepy stars. He gives you one. No words, just a gesture. You take it. It smells faintly sweet, with a whisper of morning dew. You tuck it behind your ear. You walk again. You follow a group of laborers now, all balancing baskets on their heads. They don't speak much, just the occasional grunt or half-laugh, but their presence is a kind of rhythm. Life here isn't silent. It's just not loud. There's space between sounds, room for thought, room for dreams. You find yourself approaching the edge of the system, where the gardens give way to more open water. A small stone marker sits in the soil, etched with symbols worn smooth by time and weather. You can't read them, but you don't need to. This whole landscape is a message, a letter from the past that somehow got delivered to your door. And right now you're standing in it. You breathe deeply. The scent of wet soil and blossoms thick in the air, and you feel the lake shift beneath your feet. Not in a way that unsettles, but in a way that reminds you nothing here is permanent. Not the islands, not the plants, not even the people who tend them. And yet it all endures. You close your eyes and let the sunlight press against your skin like a hand on your shoulder. The Chinampas will still be here when you wake. You follow the gardeners inland, or as inland as you can be in a world made of water. The floating garden shifts subtly beneath your feet, but you've adjusted to it now. Your steps are steady, patient, slow enough to feel the give of damp earth under the woven grass paths. A faint breeze slips through the rows of maize, carrying with it the scent of crushed herbs and sweet water. It's like walking through a whisper. Up ahead, a small gathering is formed near one of the larger Chinampas. Farmers, some young, some older, are kneeling in a circle, hands muddy, shirts rumpled, feet bare. They're not praying, though it almost looks like it. They're repairing the Chinampa. This is maintenance day. You pause at the edge, not wanting to interrupt, but one of the workers waves you closer. So you step into the scene quietly, watching the process unfold. First, bundles of tule reeds are brought out, light and fibrous, still damp from the lake. Then the men begin layering them along the edge of the garden, creating a kind of breathable netting. This keeps the garden's perimeter intact, like reapplying a natural bandage to a living organism. Mainstream historical fact. The Chinampas weren't truly floating. They were anchored. Each garden was built by weaving together layers of aquatic vegetation, mud, and silt, then pinning the whole thing down with willow trees planted at each corner. Over time, the weight and density created a stable, semi-floating island. The structure was so reliable that oxen could walk across them without sinking. It's genius in its simplicity. An entire agricultural system built without nails, bricks, or machines. Just mud, roots, and time. You crouch next to a group as another man paddles up in a canoe, the bottom packed with wet black soil from the lake bed. He uses a wide, flat scoop to toss it over the freshly repaired edges. You catch a whiff of something vaguely sulfuric. Old water, rich in decay and nutrients. The perfect stew for crops. Quirky tidbit. Some Chinampa farmers swore by singing to their plants. Not just idle humming, but structured chants passed down through generations. Supposedly, different crops required different songs. Squash liked deeper tones, while amaranth thrived under high-pitched melodies. One farmer even claimed his maize wouldn't grow unless serenaded at dawn with an ocarina. You watch the ritual of rebuilding unfold. There's a rhythm to it. Pack the reeds, seal with mud, tamp with palms, move on, over and over. It's hypnotic, meditative, like watching someone knit a sweater for the earth. You wonder what it's like to know your food grows, because your hands keep the ground from dissolving, because your grandmother taught you how to braid grass tight enough to resist the tide, because you remember to hum the right melody to your beans last spring. Historians still argue whether Chinampa agriculture could feed a modern city. Some believe it was only sustainable due to the Aztecs' meticulous water management systems, canals, aqueducts, and scheduled rotations that modern sprawl would collapse. Others argue Chinampas are a lost model of sustainable urban farming, proof that we already had the blueprint for eco-friendly cities before asphalt took over. You step aside as the gardeners finish their work. One of them rinses his hands in the canal, then dries them on the hem of his tunic. His clothes are a patchwork of woven fibers, dyed the color wet clay and sun-bleached indigo. You admire the texture, rough but soft, alive with the smell of labor. You offer to help carry a reed bundle, and they chuckle but let you. It's heavier than it looks. Your fingers sink into it slightly, the plant matter cool and damp like a freshly wrung sponge. You trail behind the others, who move easily, naturally, like the Chinampas are simply an extension of their own bodies. Soon you reach a shaded structure made from upright poles and a thatched roof, a kind of farm kiosk, if such a thing existed here. Inside there are tools, carved wooden implements for digging, a net strung with stones for fishing, bundles of twine. Nothing metal, nothing mechanical, just tools that have done their jobs quietly for hundreds of years. You rest against one of the poles, looking out over the canal. The water ripples in lazy circles. A heron stands knee-deep at the edge of the far bank, unmoving. Somewhere behind you, someone starts up a song again, this one softer, a lullaby for squash vines. And then you see it, a wide canoe gliding past, rowed by a child no older than 10. His strokes are uneven but determined. In the middle of the canoe lies a basket of produce, bright red chilies, baby zucchinis, and bunches of what looks like fresh epizode. He doesn't speak, doesn't wave, just nods once and continues on his way toward the market. You think about what it means to grow up here. Your earliest memory being the smell of damp soil, your favorite toy, a miniature paddle, knowing that your family's fortune rests not on gold or armies, but on the delicate balance of water and mud and time. You glance down at your own hands, dirt still pressed into your palms from the reed bundle earlier. You brush it off, but not all of it comes away. You leave the shade and walk the outer path of the Chinampa now, where the reeds grow thicker and the bird song is louder. Here, the world feels even older. You half expect a god to step out from behind a cornstalk and ask why you've come. You wouldn't have an answer, really, just curiosity, and maybe a deep need to know that people once thrived without concrete. You sit again, legs crossed, and watch the gardens work. They don't move, but they pulse with life. The willows whisper, the insects click, the maze stretches, and in this strange stillness, everything is happening. You lean back against a tree trunk, close your eyes for a moment, and wonder if you stayed long enough, would the garden begin to hum your name? The sun shifts slightly overhead, casting dappled shadows on the canal beside you. It's midday now, and the world around the Chinampas is anything but idle. You stand and stretch, hearing the quiet pop of a reed beneath your heel as you wander along the narrow path of woven soil and grass. The scent in the air has changed again. Less dew, more dust, more warmth, more life, too. You follow the gentle curve of canal, passing under an arch of flowering vines. They dangle like green chandeliers, the blossoms delicate and crimson, dripping with nectar. Somewhere above, a bee bumbles lazily from bloom to bloom, completely unbothered by the idea of productivity. You nod in respect. Same. Ahead of you, the path opens into a modest clearing with communal cooking space. It's nothing like a modern kitchen. No stone ovens, no gas, no countertops. Just 3 flat stones arranged in a triangle, blackened by smoke, and a clay como resting on top. A woman is flipping something soft and golden, tortillas, by the smell of it. Her hands move without looking, years of muscle memory guiding the dance of dough and fire. She offers you one with a smile and a nod. It's warm, slightly charred at the edges, and filled with roasted squash and ground pumpkin seeds. You bite into it, and for a second, you forget every other tortilla you've ever tasted. This one is made from maize grown 20 feet away, in soil touched by nothing but time and lake water. The flavor is more than flavor. It's memory, it's rhythm. It's proof that the land knows what it's doing. Mainstream historical fact. Chinampa farming was not just an agricultural system. It was a political one. The Aztec Empire distributed Chinampas as part of tribute agreements, and certain families controlled entire floating districts. Farming here meant you weren't just feeding your own home. You were feeding a city, an empire, an army. You sit beside the fire, sipping from a gourd cup of something cool and mildly sweet. Fermented agave water, maybe, or some cousin of it. Around you, other members of the Chinampa community arrive. A young man with calloused fingers carries a basket of squash blossoms. An older woman with a thick braid trailing down her back brings jars of crushed chili paste wrapped in damp cloth. They speak softly to one another, voices calm, overlapping like birdsong in a forest. Quirky tidbit. Some Chinampa communities use floating scarecrows. Yes, actual miniature boats shaped like jaguars or warriors, designed to scare off birds. They'd place them on the water with shiny obsidian eyes, hoping the reflections would keep the herons from snatching the seedlings. Sometimes, they even dress them up in tiny tunics for extra flair. There's probably a joke in there about fashion-forward farming, but you're too busy chewing. A child laughs nearby, then another, and soon you see the reason. Someone's brought a reed ball. It's lopsided and frayed, but it does the job. The kids take turns kicking along the narrow pathways, occasionally slipping and landing with a splash in the shallow canal. No one scolds them. A few chuckles ripple through the group. A few of the older folks shake their heads with a kind of fondness that only comes from knowing you did the exact same thing 30 years ago. You stand and walk over to the edge of the water again. It's glassy now, reflecting the sky like a mirror slightly warped. A few lily pads drift by. Somewhere in the distance, a frog croaks once, then twice. You imagine how this place must have looked centuries ago, when the first hands pulled mud from the lake bottom and decided to make something permanent out of the impermanent. Historians still argue whether Chinampas were truly invented by the Aztecs or inherited from an even older culture, possibly the Zacamilca. Some claim they were the Aztecs' invention entirely. Others believe they refined something that had already existed, turned it from survival to symphony. You think about the layers under your feet, not just reeds and roots, but history, one woven mat at a time. Maybe there are fragments of old pottery buried in the banks. Maybe someone dropped a carved obsidian knife into the mud 100 years ago and never found it again. Maybe some of the willow trees have seen more empires rise and fall than we ever will. A low whistle echoes through the garden. One of the farmers calling to another. It sounds like a bird, but the cadence is human. You follow it through a line of tall amaranth stalks until you reach another chinampa where medicinal herbs are being harvested. This one is different. No maize or squash here, just rows of hojasana, lemon balm, and long strings of drying white sage. A woman with a lined face and a crown of braids waves you over. She's crushing herbs in a stone mokajit. The rhythm of her work is consistent as the paddling of a canoe. She motions to you to sit, then smears a bit of paste onto your wrist. You sniff it. Mint, pine, earth. She smiles and murmurs something in Nahuatl. Words you don't know, but the tone is clear. Rest. Heal. This is good. You sit in the grass beside her, letting the breeze run fingers through your hair. You close your eyes for just a moment. Somewhere behind her eyelids, the chinampa hums, a low, slow note of old water and fresh green. The scent of the herbs fills your nose and your pulse slows. You're not asleep, but you're not entirely awake either. You rest like the gardens rest, floating but anchored. And in that moment, the idea of time slips a little. You forget the names of months. You forget the shape of clocks. You remember only the rustle of maize, the cool kiss of wind, and the distant splash of a child who never quite made the jump across the canal. You wake slowly, if wake is even the right word. It's more like surfacing, like your thoughts rise through layers of still water, the scent of herbs still lingering in your nostrils. The world hasn't changed much since you drifted into that soft-edged daze. The sun has shifted only slightly, tugging the shadows across the canal paths like a slow dance. There's movement nearby, not hurried, not loud, just a steady rhythm of daily life resuming. Someone is weaving. You recognize the dry whisper fibers being pulled tight, the tug-tug snug of hands looping plant material around itself. You glance over and see her, a woman in a deep saffron tunic, sitting on a low stool beneath a canopy of reeds. She's making a basket, and it's nearly finished. You wander over, careful not to disturb the fragile spiral she's constructing. The reeds are dyed in subtle colors, indigo, moss, rust red, and they coil into each other like a spiral galaxy that smells faintly upon water and wild fennel. Her hands never stop. Her fingers blur. It's not rushed, but it's relentless and oddly soothing. Mainstream historical fact. Basket weaving in Mesoamerican cultures wasn't just craft. It was necessity. These baskets stored seeds, carried fish, hauled mud from the lake bed. They were lightweight, water-resistant, and flexible enough to sit inside a canoe without cracking. The patterns woven into them often indicated which chinampa family or clan they belonged to. She doesn't mind you watching. In fact, she hands you a thin reed with a knowing glance. You do your best, wrapping around a curve she's already set, but it's harder than it looks. Your loop is too loose. It slips. You both laugh, and she takes it gently, tightening your mistake with practiced ease. Quirky tidbit. Some Aztec chinamperos believed that if you botched the weaving pattern too many times, it could trap evil winds inside the basket. These trapped winds were thought to cause stomach aches or spoil stored seeds. So if your corn went bad, maybe it wasn't the sun. Maybe it was your clumsy fingers letting demons sneak in. The thought sticks with you as you step away and explore farther down the canal. This next area feels more experimental. The plants are arranged in odd groupings. Flowers beside beans, chilies alongside marigolds. There are bamboo trellises with vines curling up like dancers, and hanging gourd shells clink together in the breeze like natural wind chimes. You crouch beside a large patch of blooming plants. The air is thick with bees, but none of them bother you. They move with a kind of urgent peace, if that a thing, purposeful but not aggressive. They dip in and out of flowers, legs dusted with golden pollen. You watch one land on particularly vivid bloom, bright orange with tiny purple spots, and you realize you've never seen anything quite like it. Historians still argue whether this kind of companion planting in Chinampas was rooted in trial and error observation or passed down science. Some say the farmers simply noticed what worked and stuck with it. Others believe a sophisticated knowledge of symbiotic crop behavior guided the entire garden design from start. You don't have the answer, but you do know one thing. This place runs like clockwork without a clock in sight. The sun tells the time, the plants keep score, and the people, they just listen. A splash nearby catches your attention. You peer over the edge of the canal and spot a small canoe gliding toward you, its flat bottom made of hollowed wood, and pushed along by a boy no older than 12. He paddles with a single oar, expertly shifting his weight to steer around a bend. He docks beside a narrow plank that connects one Chinampa to another and hops out with a bundle of something wrapped in cloth. You follow, discreetly of course, and find him delivering fresh herbs and flowers to what looks like a tiny open-air shrine. It's no temple, just a flat stone slab shaded by tall reeds and marked with small items. A bit of obsidian, 2 feathers, a carved wooden figure, and now, the boy's offering, bougainvillea petals and a small piece of dried fruit. You feel the hush of it, a reverence, not grand, not overly ceremonial, but real. The boy steps back, presses his fingers together in a quick gesture, and disappears again down the canal, paddle dipping quietly behind him. You linger. You don't touch the shrine, of course, but you observe every detail. The way the offerings are arranged by size, like a child's drawing a balance. The faint ash smudge from a recently extinguished incense stick. The smell, faintly spicy, faintly sweet, lingering in the still air. It reminds you that even here, in the most practical places, there's space for the spiritual. The Chinampas aren't just productive, they're sacred. You sit again, back pressed against the soft grass, and close your eyes. This time, you don't drift into sleep. Not quite. You hover, half thought, half memory, imagining how the world looked before roads and wires and city maps. Back when the land itself taught you what it needed. You imagine building one of these gardens from scratch. You picture gathering reeds, piling mud, planting maize. You try to guess how many days it would take to make one Chinampa stable enough to stand on. How many weeks before it blooms? How many seasons before it belongs to the lake as much as it belongs to you? You know the answer is somewhere between too long and just enough. A breeze tickles the back of your neck, and a new sound joined the orchestra of the garden. Rattles. You rise, curiosity reignited, and follow the hollow clatter to a group of women sitting on woven mats. Their shaking rattles made from dried gourds, filled with tiny seeds, each beat matching the tempo of their song. It's a harvest chant, soft, low, melodic, not celebratory, not mournful, just steady. Their voices rise and fall like the lake's breath, and you let the rhythm pull you forward, not to dance, not to sing, but simply to listen, to remember, to be. You sit among them quietly at the edge of the mat, your presence acknowledged and gnawed, and nothing more. You're no longer a guest. You're a part of the day. And as the gourd rattles shake and the chant wraps itself around you like a vine, you finally understand what makes the Chinampas float. It's not just reeds, not just mud. It's time, memory, hands, breath. The music lingers in your bones as you rise slowly, your limbs lazy with warmth. The chanting has faded into background, replaced now by the whisper of wind combing through rows of corn and the soft clink of ceramic jars somewhere behind you. You follow the sound across a narrow wooden bridge to the next Chinampa, this one different, tidier, more deliberate. Here, order reigns. The garden is geometric, its plots lined with wooden stakes and stone borders. You see labeled clay markers pressed into the soil, symbols etched with care beside rows of herbs and tubers. A woman stands in the center, arms folded across her chest, inspecting a row of tomato plants with a stare that could curdle milk. She wears a teal hupal pattern with swirls that mimic the lake's ripples, and a crown of calendula blossoms sits loosely on her head like she forgot it was there. You try not to startle her, but she catches you anyway with a look that says, "I know how many beans were here this morning." She softens slightly when she sees your shoes are still damp from the canal, and your hands are speckled with reed dust. You've clearly been through the works today. She gestures for you to approach. You do. Mainstream historical fact. Chinampas weren't just gardens. They were highly engineered systems. Farmers rotated crops, timed plantings with lunar cycles, and carefully monitored water levels using simple, elegant methods passed down over generations. Drainage ditches and canals weren't accidental. They were calibrated for ideal root saturation and flood control. She explains this to you, not in English, not exactly in Nahuatl either, but in the universal language of hand gestures, eyebrow lifts, and occasional jabs at the soil. You nod seriously, as if you're about to launch your own root vegetable empire. She seems to appreciate the effort. She pulls up a small root. It's bulbous, striped, and smells a bit like licorice and sweat. You're not sure whether to bite it or plant it. She laughs at your hesitation and tucks it into a pouch tied at her waist. Quirky tidbit. In Aztec markets, some farmers sold fake vegetables, slightly poisonous tubers dyed to look like prize ones, used not for cooking but for spiritual rituals or the occasional in-law deterrent. You hope that wasn't one of those. She walks you through her plots. Amaranth, chili, squash. Herbs with names you can't pronounce but wish you could. Every plant has a place, and every place tells a story. A sickle rests nearby, its wooden handle smoothed by generations of work. The whole Chinampa feels like a whisper, telling you that food doesn't come from nowhere. It takes planning. It takes patience. It takes getting your hands deep into the earth and understanding the difference between good mud and great mud. Historians still argue whether Chinampa systems were ever truly self-sustaining without outside input, whether the nutrient cycle could support endless growth, or if periodic rest or crop breaks were required. Some say they were perfect. Others argue that even paradise needs compost. You step around a shallow ditch where fish swim lazily beneath the reeds. They're not here by accident. Those fish are part of the plan. They eat mosquito larvae, fertilize the water, and sometimes end up on dinner plates. The woman points at a young boy kneeling by the edge of the woven net, scooping carefully. The cycle is everywhere. You pause to observe the boy. His concentration is fierce. lips pressed together, eyes never leaving the water. He scoops, empties, resets. A rhythm. You find yourself matching your breath to it. Scoop, breathe, empty, exhale. Behind you, someone shouts, not angrily, just loudly. You turn to see an older man calling the boy. Lunch is ready. Or perhaps another task awaits. The boy stands, slings his net over his shoulder, and trots off, leaving a small trail of wet footprints behind him on the warm soil. You follow, but at a more relaxed pace, taking the rest of this engineered Eden. The edges of the Chinampa are reinforced with woven mats and stacked stones. Small clay pipes peak from the ground, evidence of slow-drip irrigation techniques that rival some modern systems in their efficiency. You lean down, touch the soil. It's rich, almost spongy, a perfect mix of lake sediment, decayed plant matter, and silt. No fertilizers needed, just the wisdom of water. A nearby platform shaded by woven palm fronds holds several bundles of drying herbs. A girl carefully arranges them by type. Rosemary-like sprigs, soft mini leaves, stalks that crackle when touched. She's humming something tuneless, and when she catches you watching, she offers you a bundle. You bring it to your nose. The scent hits you like cool tea and warm bread at once. You don't know the name, but you want it steeped, sweetened, and in a cup immediately. She grins. Apparently, it's her favorite too. You sit on the edge of the platform with her for a few minutes. The breeze picks up, fluttering the drying herbs and ruffling your hair like an affectionate aunt. Overhead, birds dive and swoop. One lands briefly near your foot and eyes you with disdain before hopping away. Eventually, you rise, brushing dried leaf crumbs from your lap, and continue along the canal path. More Chinampas appear in the distance, some bustling with activity, others quieter, meditative. One is filled entirely with flowers. You step into it like entering a dream. Rows of dahlias, marigolds, and lilies stretch in all directions. Bright petals sway lazily, as if choreographed by an invisible hand. Bees hum. A man kneels in the center, gathering blooms into a basket lined with soft cloth. He's gentle, each flower treated like a fragile treasure. You approach and kneel beside him. He offers a blossom. You accept, cradling it in your palm. The petals are soft and sun-warmed. You smell it. You close your eyes. The world narrows to color and scent. When you open them, he's moved on, already assembling a garland, threading blooms with slender twine. He'll likely bring them to market, or to a temple, or maybe to someone's home, where they'll sit in a clay jar and make the air smell like joy. You rise again, filled with something quiet and inexplicable. Not happiness exactly, something deeper. Like you've been reminded of how simple beauty can be when it's grown slowly on floating ground. And as the light begins to bend, as the long shadows stretch across the canal paths like cat's paws, you make your way toward the edge of the gardens. You're not leaving yet, but you feel the next moment approaching. You want to be ready when it arrives. You hear it before you see it. The low creak of a boat's wooden frame shifting on still water, the rhythmic slap of a paddle, and the soft murmur of conversation. You step onto a weathered dock carved from thick reeds and sun-bleached wood. A small canoe bobs gently before you. Its prow painted with faded serpents and birds, symbols that hint at a family lineage, or maybe just someone with a good sense of drama. The boatman waves you aboard without a word. His hat is wide-brimmed, casting a shadow over half his face, and his tunic is the color of storm clouds. You climb in, careful not to tip the balance. He pushes off with the same effort you'd use to brush lint from a sleeve, and you glide. No engine noise, no choppy wake, just silence and the occasional chirp of a frog hidden beneath the lilies. The Chinampas drift past like stage sets, each one a different act in the play of life here. A woman kneeling to grind maize, a group of children chasing a dog that clearly doesn't want to be caught, a priest lighting incense at a small canal-side shrine. Everything is happening, but nothing feels rushed. Mainstream historical fact. These canals were once the lifeblood of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital. Stretching across Lake Texcoco, they connected neighborhoods, marketplaces, and farms. Nobles traveled by canoe, reclining beneath sunshades, while farmers' loaded boats would produce stacked high, lettuce, squash, maize, chilies, all balanced carefully to avoid capsizing en route to the great market of Tlatelolco. The boatman hums quietly, guiding the canoe into a narrower channel. The water here is glassy, almost unreal in its stillness. You lean over the edge and see your own face reflected, softened by ripples, framed by reeds. Behind it, fish dart through shadowy depths. One of them, no larger than your hand, follows the boat for a few seconds, then vanishes beneath a lily pad. The boatman notices your interest. He mutters something you don't catch, then gestures toward a patch of reeds. You squint and spot a nest, carefully constructed and half submerged. Inside, 3 tiny eggs rest in a swirl of feathers. Life layered upon life. Quirky tidbit. Aztec nobles sometimes kept pet axolotls, those wide-eyed, permanently smiling salamanders that never quite grow up. They were believed to be sacred, connected to the god Zolo, and occasionally featured in magical recipes. A few were even gifted in ornate clay jars, sealed with wax and ribbon like birthday trinkets. Adorable and deeply weird. The boat turns again. You pass beneath a low arch formed by 2 willow trees leaning toward each other like gossiping elders. Beyond the arch, the Chinampas shift once more, from crops and flowers to small homes. You spot a modest hut with woven walls and a thatched roof. Smoke curls lazily from its chimney, and the scent of roasted maize wafts across the water. Someone is cooking. The boatman brings a canoe to a halt beside a wooden platform. A woman waves from the doorway. She's short, powerful, wearing a saffron tunic and a woven belt adorned with turquoise beads. You step from the boat onto the platform and follow her inside. Her kitchen is humble, yet it pulses with life. The fire crackles under a clay comal where tortillas bubble and blacken in all the right ways. A small child crushes cacao nibs with a stone roller, giggling each time they pop and skip from under the pressure. A large pot simmers near the hearth, thick, fragrant, and clearly the result of someone who knows what they're doing. She offers you a tortilla hot from the griddle. You take it. It burns your fingers a little, but you don't mind. It smells like everything right with the world. Historians still argue whether these kitchen rituals were purely domestic or also sacred. Some say recipes were passed down like prayers, with each stir of the pot and sprinkle of herbs holding deeper meaning. Others claim it was just survival wrapped in a tortilla, necessary, not mystical. You eat and it's divine. The tortilla is filled with squash blossoms and soft cheese, wrapped with the kind of casual care that says, "We've been doing this for centuries." You nod appreciatively. The woman shrugs like, Of course it's good. The child, now finished with the cacao, holds up a small bowl. Inside is a thick, slightly gritty drink, chocolate blended with chili and maize. You take a cautious sip. It kicks you in the taste buds, then soothes them with warmth. You want another, but also feel like you need to sit down and reconsider every candy bar you've ever had. The family doesn't ask where you came from, and you don't offer. It doesn't matter. Here, you are part of the scene. A character briefly introduced, but fully accepted. You help stack firewood beside the hearth. The logs sticky with resin and fragrant with sap. You hold a clay jug steady while the child pours water from a larger pot. The woman tosses you a towel to dry your hands, and it smells faintly of sage and smoke. Outside, the boat waits, but you're not quite ready to leave. You step out again, eyes adjusting to the golden light filtering through the trees. The wind is picked up ever so slightly, rustling the corn stalks and sending ripples across the canal. The boatman leans against a post, sharpening a fish hook with a bit of bone. You glance back at the kitchen. The woman waves once, then turns back to her fire. The boat beckons. Again, you climb in. You push off this time, awkwardly with too much splash, but the boatman doesn't mind. He just resumes paddling, and soon the hut disappears behind the bend. The water opens before you like a story still being written. And somewhere in the reeds, a bird calls out, a high, lilting song that follows you down the canal like a farewell blessing or an invitation to return. The canal narrows again, winding like a lazy serpent between two rows of flowering chinampas. The boat slows, nudged forward only by the smallest dip of the oar. You sit in silence, letting the world unfold on either side of you like pages in a handmade book. Pages bound in reed and stitched with water. Ahead, the banks shift once more, not into farmland nor home, but into something distinctly ceremonial. A wide stone platform rises from the center of the water, its base anchored by submerged stones and skeletal tree roots. It's not large, but it hums with presence. You step out carefully as the boatman gestures for you to go alone. You climb the short steps. At the top, an altar waits. It's simple, flat stone, streaked with centuries of sun and soot. But the offerings are fresh. Marigolds, white feathers, a bowl of maize, and a tiny figurine carved from obsidian. You lean in and spot a face, tiny and detailed, mouth agape in neither song or warning. Mainstream historical fact. The Aztecs didn't separate farming from worship. Many chinampas had shrines built right into them, dedicated to deities like Tlaloc, god of rain, or Chicamcotl, goddess of maize. Farmers would leave offerings before planting, after harvest, or even during long dry spells when the canals hissed like thirsting snakes. You pause and look around. The air is warm and still, but not oppressive. Clouds drift overhead, pulling shadows across the water in slow ribbons. The distant sound of flute floats in, soft and high, like someone playing only for the herons and dragonflies. Behind the altar, a small garden grows wild with herbs. Not the structured beds of vegetables you've seen elsewhere, but chaotic tangle of scent and color. Episode, mint, wild amaranth, and something purple you can't name. Bees zip through like they've memorized a maze. Quirky tidbit. Aztec priests were often part-time botanists. Sacred gardens weren't just spiritual, they were pharmacological. Certain plants were grown for rituals, others for healing, and some, like morning glory or certain mushrooms, for inducing visions during high ceremonies. Yes, the priest tripped, and yes, sometimes it worked out great. Other times, less so, you sit near the altar and press your palm to the warm stone. It feels alive, not pulsing, but steady, as though it remembers. You wonder how many people have done the same. How many hopes whispered here? How many small dreams traded for good weather or protection from disease? Historians still argue whether these rural shrines were truly essential to Aztec religion or more personal superstitions tucked into daily routines. Some scholars claim the empire's real rituals only happened in the great temples of Tenochtitlan. Others say the gods were just as happy with marigolds on a floating garden. You breathe in. Something shifts in the air, a hush that's not silence, but reverence. A moment so still becomes sacred not because someone said so, but because everything agrees not to interrupt it. Then, gently, the spell lifts. You rise and walk back to the boat, the boatman nodding as you step aboard. He doesn't ask what happened. Neither do you. The canoe turns and heads deeper into the web of canals. The trees arch higher here, filtering the sunlight into soft gold. A kingfisher flashes past, its feathers like jewels. You drift for a while into sleep, just a few minutes, maybe more. When you wake, the scenery has changed again. Now, the Chinampas are wider, and in the distance, you hear a din, human, bustling, alive. The market. You smell it before you see it. Wood smoke, roasted maize, crushed herbs, fish, and something sweet like honey baked onto squash. The boatman ties off at a crowded dock. People surge past you, carrying bundles of firewood, baskets of tomatoes, flowers, live ducks tucked under arms, and children who appear to be made entirely of dirt and energy. You step into flow like a dropped petal, swept gently forward. This is no modern farmer's market with curated stalls and quaint signage. This is full, unapologetic life. Stalls packed shoulder to shoulder under woven awnings. Women bark prices with expert timing. Men haggle over cocoa beans and turquoise. A boy with feathers in his hair plays a drum that sounds like a heartbeat. You stop at a stall filled with red and green childs, their skins gleaming like armor. The vendor offers you a taste, just a dab on your fingertip. You try it, then cough, then hiccup, then, for good measure, cough again. He laughs and hands you a slice of cactus paddle to cool the burn. It works. Barely. You move on. At a stall nearby, a young girl arranges skulls made from amaranth and honey. Decorative, yes, but also edible. She offers you one and smiles when you accept it. It's crunchy, oddly sweet, and leaves your fingers sticky. Mainstream historical fact. Markets like this were the heartbeat of Aztec society. The Tlatelolco market could draw tens of thousands of people daily. It was highly organized, with inspectors, price controls, and even a justice system for those who cheated or stole. It wasn't just commerce. It was community, law, and culture all rolled into one. You buy a woven sash in teal and indigo. You don't need it, but the colors speak to you, and the vendor's hands are stained from years of dyeing fabric with crushed flowers and ground minerals. You see dancers next, painted, swirling, ankle bells ringing. Their movements echo a story you don't know, but you understand it anyway. There's sorrow, there's power, there's joy. A woman sings from a stall nearby. Her voice is rich and unhurried. cutting through the noise not like a sword, but like sunlight through leaves. Quirky tidbit. Singing vendors were common, not just to attract customers, but because the rhythm of song matched the rhythm of trade. Some had full ballads about their avocados or tamales. A catchy chorus could sell an entire basket. You stay longer than you meant to. By the time you return to the dock, the sky is shifting again, sunlight turning syrupy and long. The boat is still there. The boatman still waiting, patient as ever. You step back in. He pushes off. And again you float. The sounds of the market fade, replaced by the hush of water and willow. You don't look back. You don't need to, because the floating gardens keep moving. Always have. And now, so do you. The boat glides silently once more, your body loose with the afterglow of roasted maize, sweet amaranth skulls, and just enough chili to make you question your choices. You let your hand dangle over the edge of the canoe, fingers dragging softly through the water like lazy oars of their own. The market energy fade behind you, dissolving into the hush of canals again. It's quieter here, not silent, just gentler. The kind of quiet that hums instead of roars, that listens instead of interrupts. Your breath slows, and so does time. Ahead, a stretch of chinampas appears with a distinctly different tone. The gardens here are smaller, more intimate, flanked by hand-woven fences and marked by bundles of hanging herbs tied in neat braids. A cluster of homes peeks through the greenery. Stone and adobe structures with bright red clay rooftops, their corners softened by age and moss. This is not the realm of priests or poets. This is home. Your boatman gestures for you to disembark again. No grand ceremony this time, just a quiet nod toward a sloping path that leads between two chinampas where smoke curls from a low chimney. You walk. The air smells of toasted corn, crushed epazote, and wood smoke, like someone's been cooking something worthy of your undivided attention. A small dog trots out from behind a cactus pot, sizes you up, then returns to his nap without fanfare. You reach the doorway and are greeted by a woman of indeterminate age, her face carved with the kind of lines that come from squinting into sun and smiling more than necessary. She ushers you inside with a flick of her hand and no words. The interior is cool, dark, and alive with scent. Dried herbs hang in thick clusters from the ceiling. Sage, wormseed, marjoram, and a few you don't even recognize. Stone jars line the walls, and a basket of dried peppers rests beside a coiled reed mat. Mainstream historical fact. Aztec homes weren't just dwellings. They were laboratories, kitchens, schools, and apothecaries. Women were often the keepers of both the household and its medicine cabinet, using generations of knowledge to treat illnesses, bless births, and season stew, sometimes all with the same herb. You're handed a cup of something warm, maybe tea, maybe potion, maybe both. It tastes like mint met a tree and decided to settle their differences inside your mouth. Comforting, oddly energizing. She offers you a seat near the fire pit, where another clay pot simmers lazily. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat, and she begins to talk. Not to you, not exactly, but around you. Her voice is like a blanket. Soft, warm, filled with familiar rhythms, even when the words are strange. You catch fragments. Stories of frogs that bring rain. Stars that walk among humans. And one about a man who tried to grow maize upside down because he believed the gods would find it amusing. Quirky tidbit. In Aztec households, it wasn't uncommon for elders to be storytellers, teachers, and comedians all at once. The oral tradition wove everything together: mythology, medicine, weather patterns, even gossip. A well-timed story could change a child's future, or, at the very least, get them to finally stop chewing on the chili peppers. You sip again, smiling when she laughs. Her dog barks once, as if to punctuate the joke. The room feels impossibly far from anything you've known, yet more familiar than you expect. Historians still argue whether domestic life in Aztec society was as gender-balanced as some records suggest. While men often held official power, women controlled food, healing, and household rituals, arguably more influential than any feathered headdress could ever be. She begins to grind something on a matate, a stone tool worn smooth from generations of use. Maize and beans, maybe, or cacao if the gods are smiling. You watch her rhythm: forward, press, pull back, repeat. It's not rushed. It's not delayed. It's just exact. You're offered a small cake, fresh off a griddle that looks older than most maps. It's smoky and soft, filled with mashed squash and a drizzle of honey. You're not sure if it's a snack or a ceremony, but you eat it with gratitude. Outside, the sky softens towards sunset. A low, golden glow pours through the doorway and dances across the floor like the spirit of the day stretching before sleep. The dog relocates to the warm patch near the light, sighs dramatically, and closes his eyes. You feel something shift again, inside you, not around you. A realization that this floating garden world isn't just about ingenuity or survival. It's about rhythm, harmony, the dance between land and water, life and labor, ritual and rest. The woman offers you a parting gift: a sprig of fresh marigold and a wrapped bundle of dried sage. You take it, bow slightly, and whisper thank you, even though you're not sure she needs to hear it aloud. As you return to canoe, you feel lighter, not empty, not drained, but right-sized, like the world has folded you into itself properly, tucking you into a perfect crease. The boat pushes off again, and the garden home shrinks behind you, but the scent of sage lingers in your hands. The light fades as the sun dips lower, casting everything in that golden-orange glow that only lasts 10 minutes, but feels eternal when you're lucky enough to catch it. In the distance, another canoe floats past, this one filled with children tossing petals into the canal. Their laughter skips across the water like stones. You wave. One of them waves back with both hands, nearly tipping himself overboard. You grin and watch until they vanish around a bend. You stretch out, lying back in the boat as the sky purples overhead. A heron lifts off from the reeds, wings wide and soundless. Stars begin to blink open, shy and scattered at first. It's peaceful now, not empty, just perfectly calibrated. The day is closing gently, like a book you're not quite ready to stop reading. Somewhere ahead, another Chinampa waits. You're not sure what's next, but you're content to drift toward it. The boatman hums, a melody old as water. You close your eyes, the bundle of sage resting on your chest like a tiny, fragrant anchor. By the time your eyes flutter open again, dusk has melted into full-blown twilight. The sky above is a soft plum velvet, pierced here and there by the first confident stars. The canals now mirror that sky perfectly, so that when you look down, you feel as though you're drifting to the cosmos itself. On water, yes, but also among galaxies. The boat glides on, its wake sending ripples across reflected constellations. You sit up slowly, clutching the sage bundle tighter, almost as though it might tell you which direction is up. You half expect to float off into the night air like a dandelion seed. But instead you arrive again. The next Chai Nampa is unlike the others you visited. No cozy homes, no loud marketplaces, no herb-laced kitchens. This one is quiet, untouched, almost solemn. The trees are older here, twisting cypresses and high, drooping willows, like silent watchers of centuries past. Moonlight weaves through the leaves like thin silver ribbons. At the center of this floating island is a structure, modest in scale, but unmistakably sacred. A small, square temple built of dark stone, its surface etched with glyphs and inlaid with shards of obsidian that catch the light in quick, mercurial flashes. You step off the boat onto the soft ground, and for the first time, your feet don't make a sound. The boatman doesn't follow. He simply raises a hand in gentle farewell, and you feel just faintly that you've crossed a threshold. Mainstream historical fact. While the Chai Nampas were practical marvels, feeding cities and sustaining daily life, some were also dedicated to ritual and reflection. Aztec society deeply entwined agriculture with religion. Offerings to Tlaloc, god of rain, or Zacapili, god of flowers and pleasure, were often made directly on these garden islands. In a world balanced on water, it made sense that worship, too, should float. You walk the narrow stone path toward the temple, passing altars draped in flower petals, mostly marigold and cosmos, their colors still rich despite the fading light. A single candle flickers on each step, sheltered behind thin shells of translucent alabaster. The air smells of copal, sweet and woodsy, a smoke meant to bridge the mortal world with the divine. Inside the temple, there's no priest, no audience, just space, spare and sacred. In the center, a low stone basin filled with water, completely still, reflecting your face in the most unsettlingly honest way. You lean closer, half hoping to see some ancient wisdom ripple across your expression. But the water holds its secrets. Quirky tidbit. Some Aztec diviners believed dreams could be read in bowls of water placed under one's bed. Reflections in these bowls were thought to reveal not just subconscious truths, but glimpses of future weather, family fortunes, and whether or not your enemies were plotting again. Spoiler, they usually were. You sit on the temple floor, legs crossed, back straight, unsure whether to meditate or just nap with extra gravitas. The silence is almost musical, woven from owl calls, distant water sounds, and the low thrum of your own heartbeat. And then you hear it, a voice, not a human one, but something melodic rising softly from outside. You step into the doorway and see them. A procession of young singers on a boat gliding past, each wearing robes of teal and saffron, each holding a flower or a feather or flame. Their harmony doesn't seem rehearsed, yet holds together in that mysterious way only night songs can. They don't look at you as they pass, but you feel seen. A kind of shared awareness that doesn't require eye contact, just presence. Historians still argue whether these sacred Chai Nampas were used primarily for ceremony, seasonal observance, or private worship. Some records describe grand offerings, whole rituals involving dancers and elaborate headdresses, while others suggest these were more solitary sanctuaries, spaces for reflection and spiritual realignment. What they agree on, however, is that these islands were considered liminal places, not quite land, not quite water, ideal for reaching the gods. You stay there a while longer, letting the chants echo and fade, then drift back toward your boat. It's still there. Of course it is. As you climb back in, you find a small object left where you sat. A carved figurine of a hummingbird, no bigger than your thumb. Its wings are outstretched, its eyes sharp. It's been whittled from wood that smells faintly of cinnamon. You hold it in your palm and stare at it. Try not to assign too much meaning. And failing completely, the boat pushes off without a word. The stars are brighter now. The constellations more confident. The Milky Way spills across the sky like the contents of an overturned basket. And as you recline once more, hummingbird in hand, sage bundle still warm against your chest, you feel it again, that quiet thrum beneath the world, the rhythm that ties things together, land to water, ritual to routine, breath to dream. The canoe drifts on. You pass Chinampas now glowing faintly with fireflies, others dark and sleeping. One, somehow, covered entirely in white lilies that seem to bloom in the dark. Somewhere off to your left, a jaguar calls. Farther still, drums thump, just once, then silence. The gardens are slowing, settling, preparing to sleep. You do too. Your lids flutter. Your breathing matches the gentle lapping of the water. You clutch the hummingbird in your fingers, and just before sleep takes you, you swear it vibrates, ever so slightly, as though remembering what it's like to fly. You drift into sleep without fully deciding to, lulled by the rhythm of the boat, the breath of the water, and the last ghost of song in the air. But it's not a deep, unreachable sleep. It's a half-lucid, weightless kind that lets your mind wander without leaving your body behind. You're aware, in some distant corner of your brain, that you're dreaming. And because you're dreaming, anything is possible. You dream you're floating, still in the boat, but now it glides above the ground, skimming treetops and trailing sparkles of dew behind it like comet dust. The Chinampas roll out beneath you, endless and strange. They're no longer flat rectangles of soil and reed. They've twisted, blossomed, evolved. One floats upside down, roots dangling like chandeliers. Another spins slowly, like a lazy top, covered in feathers instead of plants. You pass one that's all fruit. Just fruit. No soil, no trees, just strawberries, peaches, figs, hanging midair, dripping juice into the lake. You reach out, pluck one. It melts on your tongue like a memory of sunlight. But you're not here for fruit. The dream, if that's what this is, has intentions of its own. The canoe dips suddenly. You descend through mist, and now you're not on the surface of the lake at all. You're beneath it. The water doesn't touch you. You move through it as though it's air, your hair floating around your face like seaweed in slow motion. Beneath the lake is another city, an underwater twin of the floating gardens above. Entire temples made of coral, fields of anemones that open and close as you pass. Fish the size of goats drift lazily past you, their scales shimmering like mosaic tiles. Mainstream historical fact. The Aztecs believed in layers of the world, 9 beneath the earth, 13 above. Lakes, caves, and other liminal places were often seen as portals between these realms. The underworld, called Mictlan, wasn't a place of punishment but of journey and transformation. Water held particular spiritual weight. It could nourish, cleanse, or carry you across boundaries no map could mark. You float onward. A giant turtle swims beneath you, ancient and dappled like worn stone. Atop its back grows a miniature chinampa. Yes, another garden, but this one is wild. Jungle vines, strange flowers, blossoms shaped like open mouths. Hummingbirds zip between the petals, each leaving behind a note of music instead of a buzz. The canoe settles again, lowering you onto a platform of obsidian that somehow supports itself. Here, there's a figure waiting, neither frightening nor familiar, genderless, ageless, dressed in woven reeds and petals. Their face is a mask, half sun, half skull. They hold out a hand. You take it, because that's what you do in dreams when symbols appear. The figure doesn't speak, but you hear something anyway, a voice inside your chest, not your ears. You've walked the gardens of this world. Do you wish to see the one yet to come? You hesitate, because honestly, you hadn't planned that far ahead. You were just here for the ambience. But then again, why not? The figure nods once, as though hearing your answer anyway, and taps your forehead with 2 fingers. The world flips. Now you stand in the future. Not your future, not humanity's. A different kind. A speculative, slippery place made of maybe. The chinampas are still there, but they hover, not on water, but in air, suspended by ropes of light, still growing vegetables, herbs, flowers, but also solar panels, memory crystals, bioluminescent vines. Quirky tidbit. In modern Mexico, scientists and farmers have actually begun experimenting with reviving Chinampa-style agriculture, not just for its cultural value, but because it's astonishingly efficient, eco-friendly, and resilient to drought. Some believe this ancient technology could help feed sprawling urban populations in the 21st century and beyond. You walk along a floating path of intertwined reeds and wires. Robots, small ones, shaped like birds, flip between crops, pruning and harvesting. A child runs past, laughing, barefoot on a reed plank walkway. Her hair is braided with corn husks. She waves. You wave back. You try to ask where this is, but your voice doesn't work here. It doesn't need to. Historians still argue whether ancient Aztec agricultural techniques were the most advanced of their time, or simply the most adaptable. Some suggest they anticipated principles of sustainability that modern farming only began to rediscover in recent decades. Others say that these innovations emerged not from foresight, but from necessity, born of overcrowding, sacred geography, and the sheer will survive in a valley surrounded by volcanoes. You linger in this garden of the future. It doesn't feel alien. It feels inevitable. Then the light starts to change again. Warm, drowsy. That honey gold color you now associate with waking. You blink. You're back in the boat. The real boat? Maybe. The real lake? Maybe not. But it's gentle, familiar. You know the feeling of this cushion beneath you, the weight of the hummingbird figure still resting in your hand, the scent of distant flowers and warm herbs on the wind. The boatman returns. You don't ask where he went. You already know the answer wouldn't fit neatly in a sentence. He rows quietly, and this time you recognize where you're heading. Back toward the center, back to the cradle of the gardens, back to where water and will and myth all braid together. The stars are fading now. Morning approaches, but you're not quite ready for it. Not yet. So you pull your shawl closer. You rest your head on the edge of the canoe, and you let the memory of that wild, future Chinampa echo softly through your bones. The idea of floating gardens, reborn again and again, in worlds yet to bloom. Dawn doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps into the world like warm tea through linen. Slow, deliberate, and somehow more comforting than it has any right to be. As your boat glides across the misty surface of the lake, the sky turns from deep navy to lavender to the softest gold. The stars blink out, embarrassed by the coming light, and the floating gardens begin to stretch. Literally, you pass chinampas where sunflowers crane toward the horizon like gossiping neighbors. Vines unfurl their spirals with theatrical yawns. A rooster crows somewhere, a sound so stereotypical you half expect to see it standing on top of a thatched roof. Chest puffed like an opera singer. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes with the back of your hand. Hummingbird figurines still warm in your palm. The boat rocks gently, nudging you into awareness without any real urgency. You're back in the heart of the gardens now. This place is a patchwork of memory and mourning, a tapestry woven from dreams, dew, and dirt. The air smells like damp wood, crushed basil, and the kind of pollen that makes your nose twitch just enough to feel alive. Mainstream historical fact. Chinampas weren't just for food. Aztec farmers cultivated everything from medicinal herbs to ornamental flowers on these floating plots. Some even raised ducks, turtles, or bees between the rows of maize and amaranth. It was a system so efficient that it supported one of the most densely populated urban centers in the pre-Columbian world. Tenochtitlan, the island city of stone and splendor. And here, now you see hints of that world reassembling. The boat eases past the gardener, tending to his morning tasks. He stands ankle-deep in mud, wearing a cloak of russet wool and a wide-brimmed straw, hat decorated with woven feathers. He doesn't look up as he works, just slides seedlings into the damp soil, patting each one as though tucking it into bed. You drift by a chinampa where 3 women sit in a circle, sorting flower petals into baskets, blue for offerings, red for medicine, yellow for the marketplace. They chat quietly, laughter punctuating their rhythm like chimes in wind. One reaches up and plucks a flower from her hair, setting it afloat on the water with a whisper you can't quite catch. The boatman nods toward a nearby plot, and you follow his gaze. This chinampa is dedicated to dye plants, indigo, cochineal, and wild marigold. Strips of wool hang from wooden racks, catching a new sun, swaths of brilliant teal, deep saffron, and crimson so rich it feels like a hums. Quirky tidbit. Aztec textiles were so vivid and complex that Spanish conquerors accused them of sorcery. The cochineal dye, made from crushed insects, was especially prized, so much so that it became one of New Spain's most valuable exports, rivaling silver. Entire economies once fluttered on the wings of tiny, parasitic beetles. You recline once more, watching the scenery shift. Now the gardens feel less mystical, more grounded. Real people do real things here. Pull weeds, chase stubborn goats, balance baskets on their hips like it's a sport. And yet, there's still a quiet magic in how everything moves together. The way water laps at the roots without drowning them. The way fish dart between reeds just ahead of a slow-moving duck. The way life simply cooperates. Historians still argue whether chinampa agriculture could be fully restored in modern Mexico. Some advocate for it as a solution to urban food insecurity, while others point out the challenges: polluted waterways, loss of traditional knowledge, bureaucratic zoning laws. But the gardens persist. In Xochimilco, in hidden corners of Tlaxcala, in the dreams of students and farmers alike. You drift past a group of children playing at the water's edge. One holds a frog the size of a fist. Another laughs as she tips a small canoe and dumps her brother into the lake. Their mother calls from a distance, waving a spoon threateningly. Clearly the universal symbol for "Don't make me come over there." The boatman chuckles under his breath. You glance at him. He hasn't spoken a word this whole time. Maybe he can't. Maybe he doesn't need to. His eyes meet yours for just a second, and it feels like he's saying, "See? You're part of this now." You pass a small altar, a new one, freshly swept. Candles flicker inside clay bowls. Someone's left a carved gourd, an obsidian shard, and a handful of beans arranged in a circle. The offering is small but precise, intentional, not made for tourists or textbooks, but for someone or something. You reach into your satchel, half without thinking, and pull out the sage bundle. It's dried out now, fragile and feathery. You break off a sprig and set it afloat on the water. It twirls like a dancer before sinking. It feels like a thank you, or maybe a promise to return. The boat begins to slow. Ahead, you see a familiar dock, wooden planks patched with bundles of reeds, bound tight with cord. Beyond it, the faint outline of a village waking up. Smoke curls from cooking fires. The sound of grinding maize, the slap of tortillas on stone, the low murmur of morning. You feel something settle inside you, like dust on a bookshelf, like the end of a very good chapter. The boatman eases the canoe into place. You rise, legs unsteady but heart anchored. He offers you a hand, then retracts it, not unkindly, but as if to say, "You can do this part on your own." And you can. You step onto the dock. The gardens ripple behind you, alive, endless, gently swaying. You look down at your palm. The hummingbird is gone, but you still feel it. A tiny weight, a flutter just behind your ribs. You walk forward, toward breakfast, toward people, toward a life that now feels slightly less modern, slightly more rooted. The gardens will wait. They always do. You wander the narrow path away from the dock, your sandals damp, your hair tousled from lake breeze and dream residue. Around you, the village rustles awake. A wooden gate creaks. A kettle whistles over a low flame. Somewhere nearby, someone sneezes and promptly curses the morning air. The homes here are made of adobe and cane, low and warm-colored, each one blending into the surrounding vegetation like it grew there. Their roofs are thatched, held in place with carved beams, and some are decorated with drying herbs or bundles of corn hanging like quiet trophies from yesterday's harvest. You pass a woman grinding maize on a matate, her rhythm slow but purposeful. Her child sits beside her, chewing on a tamarind pod and watching a beetle traverse a crack in the floor. The scent of masa and wood smoke follows you like a familiar melody. Your body, though refreshed from the nap and lake air, still moves in that careful, ceremonial way you've developed since arriving in this story. You're not rushing. No one here does. There's too much life between footsteps to speed through. Mainstream historical fact. In many Aztec communities, morning routines were rooted in ritual and rhythm. Grinding corn wasn't just a domestic task. It was spiritual. Each act of nourishment was a reenactment of sacrifice. Maize, after all, was sacred, a gift from the gods. Every tortilla made was a quiet offering to the cosmos. You duck beneath a wooden arch wrapped in flowering vines. Beyond it lies a communal courtyard where a group has gathered around a young man telling a story. His voice rises and falls like a breeze through reeds. Hands dance and illustrate what his words cannot. Children watch him with wide eyes, mimicking his gestures. Even the older villagers, some missing teeth or eyebrows, chuckle at the familiar tale. He's describing the day the Chinampas tried to float away entirely. The gods grew jealous, he says, and tried to call the gardens home. But the people held on, with ropes and curses and tamales. You laugh out loud, and a few faces turn to you with smiles that say, "Welcome." You find a seat on a bench carved with hummingbirds. The wood is warm from the sun, the carvings worn smooth by decades of resting elbows and story-watching hips. Quirky tidbit. In some Chinampa communities, benches were designed not just for sitting, but for listening. Certain ones were carved with symbols tied to specific deities or oral traditions. It's said that sitting on the wrong bench could pull a different story from a storyteller's mouth, whether they want to tell it or not. As the story ends, the crowd claps politely. A woman walks by offering a shallow clay bowl of something steaming and aromatic. You accept it without hesitation. Inside is a thick drink, a toll flavored with cinnamon and vanilla. It's sweet, creamy, and thick enough to slow time in your mouth. You sip, and the warmth spreads to you like sunlight through a curtain. A bell rings in the distance, not a modern chime, but the clang of metal against stone. It signals the beginning of the community's morning work. Those who fish will head to the shallows, those who tend crops will return to the floating gardens, and those who craft will set up in the market square. You decide to visit the latter. The market is bustling but quiet. In that strange way a place can be busy and peaceful all at once. You pass woven baskets filled with dried peppers, squash blossoms, gourds carved into canteens. There are rows of obsidian knives, bundles of dried herbs tied with dyed cord, clay masks stacked like theatrical mosaics. You stop at a stall draped in fabrics, layers of cotton, dyed in indigo, cochineal, and marigold. The vendor, a woman with a crown of braids, gestures for you to touch the cloth. It's soft, loomed by hand, and embroidered with spirals and waves that mimic the Chinampa canals. You trace a fingertip over one. She offers a simple trade. The small copper bead tied to your satchel for a square of the fabric. You agree. As you walk away, you tuck the cloth into your belt. You have no plan for it, but you suspect it will tell you what it wants to become. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs' markets were purely practical or also sacred. Some describe them as economic hubs, essential for survival and statecraft. Others insist they were holy grounds, where goods and gossip were exchanged under the watchful gaze of gods. It's likely both are true. After all, what's more divine than a perfectly ripe avocado? You take a path away from the stalls, this one line with flower beds and small shrines, each dedicated to a different deity or ancestor. There's one to Tlaloc, god of rain, surrounded by lilies and slick stones. Another for Quetzal, goddess of beauty and love, wrapped in morning glories. You stop at a third shrine, humble and unmarked, with only a few pebbles arranged in a spiral and a carved hummingbird feather stuck in the earth. You add your embroidered square to the stones. It's not an offering, not exactly. More of a thank you note. You whisper something you don't quite understand. Then, slowly you rise, back through the village now, past the children reenacting the floating away gardens, with much more giggling and falling, past the maize grinder and her now flower-dusted child, past the storyteller napping beneath a fig tree. The dock is empty. The boatman is waiting. You pause at the water's edge, looking once more at the gardens beyond. They look different now, less mythical, more real, still floating, still alive, still waiting. You step into the canoe, and without a word, it begins to move. The boat glides soundlessly, as if it remembers every ripple, every reed it passed on its way in. The village disappears behind you, tucked safely into its curtain of willow trees and early morning mist. Ahead, the chai nampas stretch out again, no longer hidden in shadows, but radiant under the full light of day. The lake is silver now, kissed by sun and streaked with darting shadows. Fish, birds, the occasional leaf riding the wind. You trail your fingers in the water. It's warmer than you expected, alive with memory. You pass by familiar gardens, only now they buzz with motion. Farmers crouch between rows, pruning stalks of amaranth, laughing over some joke you can't quite catch. A dog barks lazily from a shaded platform of woven reeds, its tail thudding against the wood like a slow drumbeat. Chickens cluck, bees hum, and the entire floating world feels like it's exhaling. Mainstream historical fact. The chai nampas were engineered with remarkable sustainability. Aztec farmers rotated crops, dredged fertile lakebed soil to nourish their gardens, and created a symbiotic cycle between plant, water, and human labor that rivaled modern organic systems. Some estimates claim that an acre of chai nampa could produce up to 7 harvests per year, enough to feed tens of thousands. You marvel at it, not just the productivity, but the harmony. These were not gardens slapped together in panic. They were generational, shaped over decades, even centuries, each layer of mud and mulch of love led her to resilience. The boatman shifts slightly, guiding you through a narrow canal flanked by high reeds. Here, the gardens feel more private, edges softened by vines and flowering bushes, trees leaning overhead like gentle conspirators. You spot a boy collecting snails from the base of a tree, plopping them into a clay bowl with practiced ease. He sees you and grins, revealing a missing tooth. Just past him, a small structure comes into view. It's no temple, no home, more like a garden chapel. 4 wooden pillars support a simple roof of woven thatch. Beneath it, a stone altar sits cradled in greenery. Not an altar of sacrifice, but a celebration. Fresh flowers are scattered across its surface, and 3 clay cups rest on top. Empty, save for petals and what might be drops of honey. Quirky tidbit. Some chai nampa families maintain personal shrines right on the gardens themselves, where they'd offer thanks before planting and ask permission to harvest. These shrines weren't dedicated to a single god, but to the spirit of the land, the ancestors, or even to a specific crop that had been particularly kind that season. There's even a record of one man who named his altar Maria del Mays and claimed she spoke only in riddles. You disembark without instruction, stepping onto the soft earth of a wide chai nampa shaded by young avocado trees. The boatman waits. You move toward the altar instinctively, drawn by some gravity of gratitude. You kneel, not out of faith necessarily, but out of acknowledgement. You lay your palm on the stone. It's warm. You say nothing, and yet something is heard. When you rise, you take one of the scattered flowers and tuck it behind your ear, not for show, just because it belongs there. Historians still argue whether the spiritual elements of Chinampa farming were belief systems or behavioral rituals. Were the offerings acts of religion or cultural habits so deeply rooted they became sacred through repetition? The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. You walk the length of the Chinampa slowly, savoring each step. A butterfly flits ahead of you, impossibly blue. A heron lifts in the shallows like a whispered question. The sun dapples your shoulders. The hummingbird from your dream would approve. When you return to the boatman offers a faint smile, just a tilt of the mouth. Barely there. You sit. The boat pulls away from the shrine, and you feel a subtle shift. Not in the water, but in you, a soft unraveling. You pass by new Chinampas you didn't notice before, ones ringed in white lilies, others growing chili peppers so bright they hurt your eyes. You see a man playing a wooden flute on a raised platform, his music weaving between the water birds and the rustling maize. You pass an elderly woman asleep under a jacaranda tree, a cat curled into the curve of her spine. Everything is blooming. Everything is still. You begin to hum, though you don't know the song. It's just what the moment requires. A lullaby with no lyrics, only breath and lake sound. The boat rocks with your rhythm. The sky begins to shift again, bluer now, more vivid, dotted with slow-moving clouds like sailing stones. The edges of the floating gardens blur, the way dreams do when you wake too quickly or fall too deeply. You close your eyes for just a second, just to feel the sun on your face. When you open them, you're somewhere new. It's another Chinampa, but it doesn't look real. Not quite. The colors are richer, the texture is exaggerated, like someone painted a scene with a brush dipped in honey and memory. And then you realize this isn't a place on a map. This is a memory of a place, one that belongs to you now. The boat stops. Ahead of you is a figure, cloaked, shimmering, faceless. They hold out their hand, not in warning, in welcome. You reach for it, and the garden folds into itself. Not ending, never ending, just beginning again. Your feet touch down on velvet moss. Real or imagined, it's hard to say. Everything around you is softened at the edges, like someone wiped the world down with a silk cloth. The Chinampa before you isn't one you've seen, and yet it feels familiar. A garden stitched from dreams and old stories, woven with vines that whisper your name. Above you, the sky is the kind of blue you only get in paintings. One heron glides silently past, wings stretched like white paper fans. You hear the steady plop of a frog jumping into water, followed by the gentle lap of waves brushing the garden's reed-lined border. You're not walking, you're floating. Or maybe the earth beneath your feet is simply too gentle to push back. Either way, you're drawn deeper into this space. Around you, everything is growing. Squash flowers curling open like golden trumpets, rows of beans climbing poles made of polished willow, maize with silken tassels dancing like tiny banners in the breeze. Mainstream historical fact. The Aztecs developed an intricate companion planting system called the Three Sisters, maize, beans, and squash, which supported one another biologically and allowed for maximum yield. The corn stalks gave the beans something to climb. The beans added nitrogen to the soil, and the squash spread low to shade the ground, keeping moisture in and weeds out. In your hand, a seed appears. You don't know how it got there. You look around. There's no one prompting you, no ceremony waiting to unfold. just the sound of birdsong and distant water drums. So you kneel, dig a small hole with your fingers, drop the seed into the earth, and cover it. There's no miracle sprouting, no bursolite, just soil, stillness. But something shifts in your chest, like a knot gently untying itself. As you stand, a voice somewhere, maybe above, maybe inside, whispers a name. Not your own, not in a language you recognize, but it sits on your shoulders like a blessing. You don't repeat it. You don't need to. Ahead, a garden stretches in all directions. Not just one Chinampa, but many, some you recognize from earlier. The one with the boy and the snails, the shrine with its clay cups, but others are new. Some float freely, bobbing gently. Others are anchored to trees that bend low with mangoes and papayas. There's one that appears to be stitched entirely of morning glories, and another that seems to breathe with each breeze. And there are people, not all at once, not crowding you, but scattered like characters from a play waiting for their cue. A girl washing corn in a clay basin, an old man laughing as he sharpens a wooden hoe, a pair of lovers sleeping under a cloak of banana leaves, a mother rocking a child in a hammock strung between two saplings that weren't there a moment ago. Quirky tidbit. It's believed that infants born on the Chinampas were sometimes blessed with water from the lake mixed with crushed flower petals, each petal chosen for a specific virtue, like courage, patience, or fertility. One rare ceremony involved bathing the child in a mixture of lake water and crushed firefly wings, thought to grant the child a glowing soul. You reach out and touch the bark of one tree. It hums. Or maybe your fingers are simply remembering too much all at once. Historians still argue whether the visual records we have of Chinampas are accurate. Some say the murals and codices are exaggerated, utopian renderings meant to glorify the empire's agricultural prowess. Others argue they're understatements, and the reality was even more dazzling. Either way, no one who's truly studied them doubts their beauty or their magic. You walk forward and find yourself circling a spiral-shaped Chinampa, its beds tiered like a coiled serpent. At the center is a single obsidian mirror resting atop a stone pedestal. The mirror is still. You lean in. Your reflection stares back, but it's not what you expect. You're dressed in Aztec textiles, a tunic dyed in teal and ochre, a sash embroidered with hummingbirds and maize, your hair braided with threads of golden feathers. You look calm, rooted, timeless, and then the image shifts. The face blurs, reforms. You see a dozen others, faces of farmers, builders, mothers, weavers, priests, fishers. One by one, they look out at you. Then the water ripples, and the image disappears. You blink. You're standing alone on the spiral garden. No pedestal, no mirror, only the hush of midday and the distant call of a conch shell echoing across the lake. It's an invitation, or a reminder. You follow the sound. The Chinampas seem to part before you, forming a slow, curving path back toward the center of the lake. You step onto a raft draped in wildflowers, and it carries you. No oars, no wind, just motion. You pass under an arch of jacaranda blossoms, their petals falling like soft rain. You pass gardens filled with medicinal herbs, ones used to treat everything from toothaches to insomnia. You pass a floating stage where dancers move in slow, sweeping gestures, every step synchronized with the beating of a high drum. Their faces are painted, not in war markings, but in spirals and suns and soft crescent moons. And then, just as quietly as you began, the raft slows. It nudges gently against the edge of a final garden, one you recognize from a dream, or maybe from earlier. The same tree, the same flowers, the same place where you left the seed. Only now there's a sprout, tiny, curled, but real. You reach out, your hand trembling slightly, and brush the leaf with the back of your knuckles. It trembles, and then it grows, not wildly, not magically, but with purpose. The kind of growth you could watch for hours. The kind that sings, not shouts. The raft disappears. You lie down in the garden, right beside the sprout, the moss cradling your head like an old friend. Your eyes drift closed. And for once, you're not worried about waking. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. The lake breathes. The garden dreams. And so do you. The air is syrupy and slow, the way it gets in the minutes just before dusk, when the world exhales, and even the birds start singing lullabies instead of announcements. You lie motionless beside the sprout, and though your eyes are closed, you can feel the light changing, a slow fade, like a candle finally accepting sleep. The garden has grown quieter around you. Less motion, more stillness, as if it, too, is preparing to rest. From somewhere not far, a soft chime rings, perhaps wind catching a string of hollow reeds, or some unseen creature tapping rhythmically on a gourd. You can't place it. You don't need to. The sound drifts in and out like a breeze. The sprout next to you has grown another inch. Not in a miraculous, fireworks way, but in the way things grow when no one's watching. Roots quietly threading downward, tiny veins finding the courage to stretch. Mainstream historical fact. The Aztecs believed that corn had a soul. It wasn't just a food, it was a divine being. Each stage of growth, from seed to stalk to cob, was guided by the maize god, Señatl. Some festivals were held not for the harvest, but for the planting, celebrating the act of potential, not just results. Every seed was a prayer. You wonder what prayers are whispered now. Maybe yours, or maybe the garden's. A ripple passes across the Chinampa like a sigh. You sit up slowly, your body heavy with comfort, like it's been weighed down by kindness. Your bones feel warm, your joints smooth, like the whole journey was a bath for your spirit. You stretch your arms overhead and look around. The raft that carried you here is gone. The path behind you, gone too. Just water now. Golden. Still. Endless. And yet, you're not stranded. You're home. Quirky tidbit. Some Aztec nobles believed that every person had a guiding plant spirit, like a leafy sibling, that shared your fate. If your spirit plant thrived, so did you. If it withered, you'd best drink more herbal tea and reconsider your life choices. One scribe supposedly married a squash vine in a ceremony witnessed by 3 witnesses and an extremely confused goose. You laugh at the thought, softly, reverently, then press a palm to your chest. You don't know what kind of plant might be tied to your soul, but today, it might just be this tender sprout, curling toward the sky with stubborn grace. Historians still argue whether Chinampa Gardens were primarily agricultural, spiritual, or socio-political in purpose. Were they feats of food security, living temples to the gods, or status symbols flaunted by the nobility? The truth likely lies in their very endurance, that something so functional, so beautiful, and so spiritual could exist all at once. Not either or, both and. The sky above shifts into soft lavender, streaked with rose and the faintest silver. A dragonfly hovers near your cheek, considers you for a moment, and flits away. The air smells of water and earth and something faintly sweet. Maybe squash blossom, maybe memory. You look to the sprout. Its leaves are now fully unfurled. You whisper a thank you. It doesn't answer. It doesn't need to. Its answer is in the growing. You rise slowly, brushing loose petals from your robe. No one calls you. No one hurries you. There's no next stop, just a walk. You step off the chinampa. But instead of water, you find earth, firm and dry beneath your feet. The lake has receded. Or maybe the garden has risen. Either way, you're walking through a field now. Dry grasses waving at your sides, seeds catching in your sleeves, the sky widening above you like an invitation. You spot a figure in the distance, cloaked, familiar. They raise a hand, not to beckon, not to halt, just to say, you made it. And you nod because yes, you did. The path softens beneath your steps now, turning from field to cloud, from memory to feeling. Your body grows heavier, but not in the burdensome way. It's the weight of exhale, the comfort of finally setting something down. Each breath becomes slower, each blink longer. And the chinampas, the floating gardens, the whispered songs, the boat that carried you, all begin to blur at the edges. Not forgotten, just gently folded into the pages of your mind, like pressed flowers in an old book. Let the colors linger. Let the water still. Let the sky close around you like a silk curtain, quiet and kind. Your shoulders soften. Your thoughts melt into background, and the world narrows into a calm, flickering silence, like candlelight behind closed lids. You've seen where maize grows like prayers. You've walked where the soil floats. You felt time ripple around you and known what it means to truly rest. There's nothing left to do now. No questions to answer. No gardens to tend. Just the sound of your own breath. Even the wind has stopped its song. And in that quiet you find it, a space made just for you. Soft, still, waiting. So close your eyes. Let the garden dream for you. Let the water carry you deeper. And drift, drift, drift.